All right, let's jump right in. Today's explainer is an absolute game changer. We're looking at a structural blueprint for navigating those high-pressure, incredibly hyped, free AI workshops that seem to be literally everywhere right now. We're going to dismantle this entire marketing trap piece by piece. So here's a massive question for you, and it really sets the stage for everything we're talking about today. Are you walking into these events as a vulnerable customer who's just desperate for some kind of miracle solution? Or are you entering as a detached scientist, objectively observing the gears of a marketing machine? Our source materials strongly advocate for a massive mindset shift here. By adopting this scientist lens, you almost instantly gain immunity to the manipulation. Okay, here's our agenda. Our structural map of the trap. We're covering the invisible entry bridge, the 3-act webinar script, substance versus hype, the logical Hehe Shield, and finally, extracting the pure frequency. Let's get into it. Part 1, the invisible entry bridge and how you enter this cross-industry ecosystem. Because honestly, this whole thing kicks off way before you even realize it. You know how it is, you're just online doing something totally mundane like buying groceries or paying a bill, and boom, you get an automated, free reward for an AI workshop. The sources point out that marketing doesn't live in isolated silos anymore. It's a highly connected ecosystem. You are literally being walked across an invisible bridge from a basic physical need right into a targeted psychological lure for wealth or status. You're not just an attendee, you know? You're the product being moved between data silos. And that registration form you fill out, yeah, it's not actually about saving your seat. The sources call it a financial thermal scan. Before the workshop even starts, they are extracting your data. They categorize your status, whether you're a student, an employee, retired, just so they can perfectly tailor the psychological triggers they're going to use on you later. They're checking your income to measure your depth of pocket, which tells them exactly where to set their high-pressure price anchors. But there's a brilliant tactical move to beat this. Our sources call it the Joker's counter. When you register, intentionally pick the student status. Why? Because it instantly neutralizes that financial thermal scan. You completely remove the scent of money, which makes you an invisible observer. You still get in, but you deny them the exact data they need to manipulate you. It's genius. All right, moving on to part 2, the 3-act webinar script. This is where we document the specimen. Once you log into the live event, you have to realize you're basically watching a highly scripted movie. Act 1 is the bait. They show you basic ChatGPT demos to make you feel like you're learning insider secrets, which builds a false sense of debt to the host. Then comes Act 2, the pivot. They suddenly shift from teaching the tool to telling you how your career is failing without it, really stirring up that frustration. And then finally, Act 3, the climax, where they drop the heavy, high-pressure anchor pitch. But let's pause for a second and think back to our Joker's counter. You registered as a student with zero income, right? Well, that creates what the texts call the empty wallet paradox, right at the climax of their pitch. Think about it. As the untouchable scientist observing all this, you can just sit back with a knowing smirk and apply pure logic to their big, hyped-up 400% salary hike guarantee. Our sources highlight the absolute absurdity of this. $0 of income multiplied by a 400% hike is still exactly zero. The entire machine's math breaks down the second you stop playing by their rules. Which brings us to part 3, substance versus hype, and building your observer's mental checklist. Because, believe it or not, there might actually be some useful info buried in there. You need a solid observe and verify framework. It's like a mental map of their 3-step funnel: the hook that grabbed you, the value demo that builds trust, and the inevitable upsell. Just knowing this funnel exists means you are absolutely never caught off guard when the sales pitch finally drops. As an outsider looking in, you can use a simple filter to weigh what they're saying. Are they teaching you the actual substance, like the fundamental why behind a tool, deep workflows, and honest limitations? Or is it just pure hype? You know, promising you'll earn locks with zero effort, showing super basic clicking demos, and relying on engineered urgency. The scientist writes down the substance and just totally discards the hype. Okay, part 4, the climax. Defeating the biochemical attack with what the sources call the logical Hehe Shield. In Act 3, you're always going to face the mirage of anchor pricing. The host is going to claim the course has some massive real value, let's say 3 locks, just to anchor a really high number in your brain. Then, miraculously, just for today, it drops to $28,600. It is a straight-up illusion designed to target your desperation and make a really expensive product feel like a fleeting, once-in-a-lifetime bargain. You have to contrast the marketing costume with the naked reality. They'll scream about limited seats and start a 10-minute countdown timer, but our sources note that engineered urgency completely falls apart when faced with a simple, knowing laugh, the hee-hee circuit breaker. Because the reality is, truth doesn't expire. If that knowledge is actually valuable today, it's going to be valuable tomorrow without a fake ticking clock. The texts make a really profound observation here. These webinars are literal biochemical attacks. They are specifically engineered to spike your cortisol and adrenaline. So to counter it, you have to physically break the digital illusion. Use the physical disruption protocol. When that high-pressure pitch starts, physically stand up from your chair. Mute the audio completely, walk right out of the room, and say something out loud to re-anchor yourself to physical reality, like, "The wall is blue." It totally severs the emotional manipulation. Finally, part 5. Extracting the pure frequency. Let's look at the old monk conclusion. After the webinar finishes, do not do anything right away. You have to execute a post-workshop full stop. Enforce a strict 24-hour quarantine on your notes. You really need to let that biological stress and adrenaline completely evaporate out of your system. Then, the next day, you look at your notes, you extract the pure frequency, the actual usable logic, and you toss out all the hype and the sales costumes. There's this beautiful insight from the text that perfectly captures this whole philosophy. Skills grow in soil, they aren't bought in a webinar. Let that sink in for a second. Genuine mastery takes patient cultivation over time. It is not some overnight miracle you can just add to your cart while a timer counts down. So, armed with this structural map, the way you engage with this digital ecosystem is finally in your hands. You have the blueprint now. So I'll leave you with this. Next time that invisible bridge appears on your screen, are you going to walk blindly into the trap as a desperate customer, or will you sit back and observe its gears as an untouchable, logical scientist? Think about it. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer.